What if I told you that somewhere a file already exists with your name on it, and inside that file is a verdict, not because of something you did, but because of who you are? You wouldn't ask, am I guilty? You'd ask, guilty of what? And the terrifying part is that no one answers. Because this isn't just Joseph K.'s story. It's the story of every person who has ever felt judged without understanding why. The trial Franz Kafka, the day your life is judged without a crime. Most people believe their biggest fear is death. It isn't. The real fear is waking up one day feeling that something is wrong and having absolutely no idea how to fix it. Maybe you felt it. A message that simply says, we need to talk. A strange silence from someone you love. Getting called into a meeting without being told why. Opening your phone and seeing a notification that instantly changes your heartbeat. Nothing has happened yet, but somehow everything already has. Because uncertainty is one of the cruelest forms of fear. Your imagination becomes the prosecutor. Your mind writes accusations before anyone else has to. And here's the disturbing part. Sometimes there isn't even an accusation. Just the feeling that you're already guilty. That is where Franz Kafka begins. Not with a murder. Not with a mystery. Not with a villain. He begins with something much more terrifying. A normal morning, Joseph K. wakes up expecting breakfast. Instead, he finds strangers in his room. Not police officers. Not soldiers. Just ordinary-looking men, calm, polite, almost bored. And then they say something that changes everything. You are under arrest. No explanation. No evidence, no crime. Just those words. If you've never read the trial, that scene might sound ridiculous, almost absurd. But Kafka understood something psychologists now know very well. The human brain doesn't need certainty to suffer. It only needs possibility. Imagine someone tells you, we're investigating you. That's enough. Your memory starts searching. Did I say something? Did I forget something? Did I hurt someone? Even innocent people begin looking for crimes they never committed. That's why false accusations can feel so devastating. Not because they are true, because your own mind starts helping them. Kafka understood this over a century ago. Joseph K. keeps asking the obvious question. What have I done? Nobody answers. Instead, they explain procedures, rules, departments, officials, everything, except the thing that matters. Notice how familiar that feels. How many times have you contacted customer support, only to spend an hour learning the system, without getting an answer? How many people have fought bureaucracy, not because they were wrong, but because nobody could explain anything? Kafka isn't writing fantasy. He's exaggerating reality. Just enough that we finally recognize it. The strange men don't even seem evil. That's important. If they were monsters, the story would be simple. Instead, they behave like employees. People doing their jobs. People following instructions. People who don't even understand the system themselves. And that's where Kafka quietly introduces one of the most uncomfortable ideas in literature. The greatest oppression rarely comes from villains. It comes from ordinary people who stop asking questions. One of the warders tells Joseph K. Something astonishing. The authorities never search for guilt. They are drawn toward the guilty. Think about that. The system assumes guilt first, and reality second. Sound familiar? Social media does this every day. A rumor spreads. Thousands of people decide someone is guilty. Evidence arrives later. Sometimes never. Public opinion has already reached its verdict. Kafka saw this long before the internet existed. Joseph K. keeps insisting something must be wrong. He lives in a civilized country. There are laws. There are rights. There must be some mistake. Because that's what all of us believe. Until the system stops working for us. Then we discover something terrifying. Systems don't feel. People inside systems often stop feeling too. Here's what makes the trial different from almost every courtroom story ever written. The question isn't, will Joseph K. prove his innocence? The real question is, what happens to a human being who is never allowed to understand the rules? That's a completely different story. Because human beings need meaning almost as much as they need food. Take away meaning, and the mind starts creating its own. Psychologists call this the need for cognitive closure. We crave explanations. Any explanation. Sometimes, we would rather hear a painful truth than endless uncertainty. Kafka weaponizes that instinct. Every chapter offers another clue, another official, another office, another promise that answers are coming. But the closer Joseph K. gets, the further they move away, like chasing a horizon. And maybe you've lived that story already. Waiting months for medical results, waiting for immigration papers, waiting for an employer's decision, waiting for someone to text back after saying, "We need to talk." Life teaches us something painful. Sometimes, waiting hurts more than knowing. But here's the twist almost everyone misses. Joseph K. isn't trapped because he's physically imprisoned. He goes to work. He walks through the city. He meets friends. Technically, he's free. The arrest changes almost nothing externally. It changes everything internally. And that may be Kafka's greatest insight. The strongest prisons are psychological. The moment Joseph K. accepts that his case matters, the court no longer needs chains. He carries the prison inside his own mind. Every conversation becomes suspicious. Every stranger becomes significant. Every silence becomes evidence. Without realizing it, he begins participating in his own prosecution. This is why the trial still feels modern. Because today, millions of people wake up every morning already feeling judged. Judged by employers, by followers, by family, by algorithms, by strangers, sometimes by themselves. We've built invisible courts everywhere. And maybe that's why Kafka never tells us the crime. Because if he did, the story would only belong to Joseph K. Without a crime, the story belongs to everyone. Every viewer can quietly substitute their own. Their insecurity, their regret, their secret, their fear. Kafka leaves the blank space, and our minds rush to fill it. But Joseph K. still believes logic can save him. He thinks if he finds the right official, asks the right question, makes the right argument, everything will return to normal. He has no idea that normal is already gone. And in the next part, Kafka takes us deeper into one of literature's most disturbing worlds. Not because it is cruel, but because it feels frighteningly familiar. The system that doesn't need you to be guilty. There's something strange about power. The most effective kind doesn't need violence. It only needs your cooperation. That's where Joseph K. makes his first mistake. He still believes the court wants justice. It doesn't. It wants participation. And those are very different things. A few days after his arrest, Joseph K. receives a phone call. He's told to appear before the court. No official letter. No formal charges. No lawyer. Just an address. A building in one of the poorest parts of the city. A Sunday morning. As if justice were something squeezed into people's day off. Notice how Kafka keeps doing this. Nothing feels impossible, just wrong. Slightly off. Enough to make you uncomfortable. Not enough to make you rebel. And that's exactly how dysfunctional systems survive. Joseph K. expects a courthouse, columns, judges, order. Instead, he finds an ordinary apartment building. Children running through hallways. Laundry hanging from windows. People cooking lunch. The courtroom is hidden inside everyday life. Kafka is quietly telling us something. Oppression rarely announces itself. It rents a room inside normality. Have you ever noticed how people adapt to almost anything? The first time you're treated unfairly, you're outraged. The 10th time, you're tired. Eventually, you stop expecting fairness at all. Human beings don't just adapt to comfort. We adapt to dysfunction. That's one of our greatest strengths. And one of our greatest dangers. Joseph K. finally reaches the courtroom, except it doesn't look like one. It's crowded, hot, chaotic. People whisper. Nobody explains anything. Nobody even seems surprised he's there. As if they've all accepted that confusion is simply how the world works. Then something unexpected happens. Joseph K. fights back. He gives a speech. He mocks the court. He attacks its corruption. He exposes how ridiculous the entire process is. For a moment, it feels like he's winning. The audience even seems to respond. Finally, someone is telling the truth. Or so he thinks. Then Kafka pulls the rug out from under us. Joseph K. slowly realizes the audience isn't neutral. Almost everyone there already belongs to the court. The people applauding him. The people judging him. The people pretending to listen. They're all part of the same machine. The game was never fair. He simply didn't know he was already inside it. Think about that for a second. How often do we mistake the appearance of choice for actual freedom? You can click, comment, vote, complain, appeal. But does any of it actually change the system? Sometimes yes. Sometimes no. Kafka isn't saying resistance is pointless. He's asking a darker question. What if the system already knows exactly how you'll resist and has made room for it? Here's one of the most unsettling truths in the trial. Nobody forces Joseph K. to return. He keeps going. Nobody drags him back. Nobody threatens him. He chooses it again. And again. And again. Why? Because uncertainty is addictive. The human brain hates unfinished stories. Once you're trapped inside a question, you'll sacrifice almost anything for an answer. This is why conspiracy theories become so powerful. Why toxic relationships last for years. Why people obsess over someone who ghosted them. Not because they enjoy suffering. Because they want closure. Kafka understood that closure itself can become a prison. There's another detail many readers overlook. The officials never seem rushed. Joseph K. is desperate. The court isn't. He wants answers today. The court has all the time in the world. And suddenly, time itself becomes a weapon. Anyone who's ever dealt with bureaucracy knows this feeling. Every delay slowly changes your personality. You become impatient, then anxious, then suspicious, then exhausted. Eventually, you stop asking whether the system is wrong. You start wondering whether you're the problem. That's the real victory. Here's a viral truth worth remembering. The most dangerous prison is the one that convinces you the bars are your own fault. As Joseph K. becomes more obsessed with his case, his real life begins shrinking. His work suffers. His relationships become awkward. Every conversation somehow circles back to the trial. Without noticing, his identity starts disappearing. He is no longer Joseph K. He is the accused. Nothing else. We do this today more than ever. Someone loses a job. They stop saying, "I'm Sarah." They start saying, "I'm unemployed." Someone gets divorced. "I'm divorced." Someone gets canceled online. "I'm the person everyone hates." The event becomes the identity. Kafka saw how dangerous that transformation is. Because once a label replaces a person, escaping it becomes almost impossible. The court never tells Joseph K. who he is. He decides that himself. And that's even more tragic. Because human beings often become the stories they repeat. There's another uncomfortable pattern. Every person Joseph K. meets offers advice. Different advice. Contradictory advice. Confusing advice. One says cooperate. Another says resist. Another says hire a lawyer. Another says don't. Sound familiar? Welcome to the internet. Millions of voices. Infinite opinions. Almost no certainty. Information has never been more available. Wisdom has never been harder to find. Kafka isn't criticizing knowledge. He's criticizing noise. Because noise feels like progress, while quietly keeping you exactly where you started. And then something even stranger begins happening. Joseph K. notices that everyone seems connected to the court. The painter, the officials, the workers, the people in hidden offices, the women, the servants. Every path somehow leads back to the same invisible institution. The court isn't just an organization anymore. It's becoming a world. That's when the novel stops being about law and starts becoming something much larger. A system of meaning, a belief, an atmosphere, like living inside a dream whose rules everyone else understands. Except you. Maybe that's why readers still find the trial so disturbing. Because the court doesn't only resemble governments. It resembles social expectations, family expectations, religious expectations, corporate culture, even our own inner voice. How many invisible courts are we standing before every day? The court of success, the court of beauty, the court of productivity, the court of other people's opinions. No judge ever speaks. Yet somehow, we still feel sentenced. Here's another truth Kafka leaves us with. Power doesn't become unstoppable because it's strong. It becomes unstoppable because eventually people stop imagining life without it. And Joseph K. hasn't reached that point, not yet. He still believes there's someone higher, someone reasonable, someone who will finally explain everything. He still thinks the maze has a center. He has no idea that the deeper he walks, the less certain reality itself becomes. And in the next chapter of this journey, Kafka introduces the people who claim they can save him: lawyers, artists, lovers, experts. Each one promises a way out. Each one pulls him even deeper into the labyrinth. Because sometimes the people selling hope are simply another room inside the prison. The people who promise to save you. There comes a point in every crisis when you stop looking for answers and start looking for someone to tell you what to do. That's usually when you're most vulnerable, because desperate people don't buy solutions. They buy certainty, and certainty is one of the easiest products to sell. By now, Joseph K. has accepted something he never wanted to believe. The trial isn't going away. It follows him to work. It follows him home. It follows him into every conversation. The court no longer needs to send officers. Joseph K. carries it with him. And once that happens, everyone suddenly has advice. One person says, you need the right lawyer. Another says, you need the right connections. Someone else whispers, you need influence. Not justice. Not truth. Influence. Notice how the language has changed. Nobody talks about innocence anymore. They're talking about strategy, about survival, because somewhere along the way, everyone has accepted that fairness is no longer part of the game. Have you noticed how often this happens in real life? When people enter broken systems, they stop asking, how do we fix this? They start asking, how do I survive it? That shift is more dangerous than it looks, because the moment survival replaces justice, the system has already won. Joseph K. hires a lawyer. At first, it feels like progress. Finally, someone who understands the rules, someone who knows the hidden passages, someone who speaks the court's language. But Kafka immediately destroys that hope. The lawyer doesn't simplify the system. He becomes another layer of it. Meetings become longer. Explanations become more confusing. Promises become vaguer. Joseph K. waits. And waits. And waits. Without moving any closer to freedom. Here's the disturbing truth. The lawyer isn't necessarily dishonest. He genuinely believes he's helping. That's what makes Kafka so terrifying. His villains rarely think they're villains. They are simply people who have adapted to absurdity. Think about modern life. How many industries quietly depend on problems never being fully solved? Debt, endless subscriptions, complicated insurance claims, consultants explaining systems that shouldn't require consultants. Sometimes, complexity becomes a business model. Kafka understood something centuries before corporate jargon existed. Confused people are easier to manage. Then comes one of the strangest characters in the novel. A painter, not a judge, not a prosecutor. A painter. At first, that seems ridiculous. What could an artist possibly know about justice? Everything. Because this painter creates portraits for judges. He's close enough to power to understand how power actually works. And what he tells Joseph K. might be the most hopeless conversation in the entire novel. There are different kinds of acquittal. Official acquittal. Apparent acquittal. Endless postponement. Notice what's missing: freedom. The painter explains that true acquittal almost never happens. Instead, people spend their entire lives managing their case. Managing. Not ending. Read that again. Managing. Not ending. Isn't that exactly how many people live today? Managing anxiety. Managing stress. Managing debt. Managing burnout. Managing loneliness. We don't solve problems anymore. We learn to function beside them. Here's a line worth remembering. Sometimes the system doesn't need to defeat you. It only needs to keep you busy forever. This is where the trial quietly transforms into something much larger than a story about law. The court begins to resemble life itself. Think about it. How many invisible standards are you chasing? The perfect career, the perfect body, the perfect relationship, the perfect reputation, the perfect version of yourself. Who created those standards? Can you name them? Or have they always been there? Like Kafka's court, Joseph K. believes that somewhere there must be a final authority, someone who actually understands everything. We all believe this. We imagine there's someone behind the curtain, the CEO, the government, the algorithm, the experts, someone who knows exactly what's happening. But what if there isn't? What if the people above are just as confused as the people below? That's one of Kafka's darkest possibilities. Then something unexpected happens. Relationships enter the story. Not as comfort, as distraction. Several women are drawn toward Joseph K. Some seem fascinated by accused men. Others promise influence. Others offer intimacy. At first, it feels almost romantic, until you notice something disturbing. Every relationship is connected to the court. Love itself becomes political. Affection becomes transactional. Even desire has fingerprints from the system. Kafka isn't saying love is fake. He's saying institutions eventually invade every private space. Even the places we believe belong only to us. Think about today. Dating apps, follower counts, professional networking, personal branding. Sometimes, our relationships start looking less like connections and more like negotiations. Here's another uncomfortable truth. The more your identity depends on external approval, the easier you become to control. Joseph K. keeps searching for people who can save him. The lawyer, the painter, the officials, the women. Every new person seems to hold another key. Every key opens another locked door. Never the exit, just another hallway. This is the psychology of the labyrinth. The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to admit you're lost. Because if you've already spent months or years walking forward, turning around feels like failure. Economists call it the sunk cost fallacy. Kafka simply turned it into literature. How many people stay in careers they hate because they've already invested 10 years? How many stay in relationships that died long ago because leaving would mean admitting the past was wasted? Sometimes, the prison isn't the walls. It's the time you've already spent inside. Then Kafka introduces one of the most famous moments in the novel, a priest inside a cathedral. You expect comfort. Instead, you receive another riddle. The priest tells Joseph K. a parable A man spends his entire life waiting before the door of the law. The door is open, yet he never enters. He keeps asking permission. He keeps waiting. He keeps believing the right moment will come. Only at the end of his life does he discover the door was meant only for him. And now, it's closing forever. It's one of the most devastating metaphors ever written, because it isn't really about law. It's about hesitation, about fear, about permission. How many dreams die because people spend their lives waiting for someone else to tell them they are allowed, waiting for confidence, waiting for perfect timing, waiting for approval, waiting for certainty. Sometimes, the guard isn't stopping us. We're stopping ourselves. But Kafka refuses to make it that simple, because the priest also suggests something even darker. Maybe the man never truly had a chance. Maybe the system was designed to keep him waiting. And suddenly, the novel asks a question that still haunts readers today. How do you tell the difference between patience and surrender, between hope and obedience, between faith and manipulation? This is where the trial stops being Joseph K.'s story. It becomes ours, because every one of us stands before invisible doors. Some never open them because they are afraid. Others never realize they were never locked. And in the final part, Kafka delivers one of the bleakest endings in literary history. Not to tell us that life is hopeless, but to force us to confront one final question. If no one ever explains the meaning of your life, who gave you permission to stop living it? The most terrifying verdict is the one you accept yourself. There is a strange moment that happens before every tragedy. Not when hope disappears, when resistance does. Because people don't usually collapse all at once. They surrender, one small decision at a time. And that's exactly what Kafka wants us to watch. Not a man being defeated. A man slowly becoming compatible with his own defeat. Nearly a year has passed. The trial has consumed Joseph K.'s life. He knows no more than he did on the first morning. No crime, no evidence, no verdict. Just endless procedures, endless waiting, endless anxiety. And something has quietly changed. He no longer asks, "Why is this happening?" He asks, "What should I do next?" It sounds like a small difference. It isn't. One question searches for truth. The other assumes the system is already right. Think about how often we do this ourselves. A company treats us unfairly. Instead of asking, "Why does this system exist?" we ask, "How do I survive it?" A toxic relationship destroys our confidence. Instead of asking, "Why am I accepting this?" we ask, "How do I make them love me?" Sometimes, the most dangerous moment isn't when something breaks us. It's when we stop imagining another way. Then comes the final day. Nobody announces it. No dramatic trial. No courtroom. No public sentence. Two men arrive, quietly, politely, almost professionally, just like the men who arrested him a year earlier. Kafka completes the circle. The nightmare began with ordinary people. It ends with ordinary people. Joseph K. goes with them. That detail matters. He walks. No chains. No struggle. No desperate escape. Readers have argued about this for a century. Why doesn't he run? Why doesn't he fight? Because Kafka isn't writing about physical imprisonment. He's writing about psychological surrender. The prison was finished long before this moment. This is one of the most misunderstood endings in literature. People often say Joseph K. gives up. But that's too simple. The real tragedy is that the court no longer needs to force him. It has successfully changed how he sees himself. And once that happens, violence becomes almost unnecessary. Here's a line worth remembering. Every system dreams of one thing: not controlling your body, controlling the story you tell yourself. The execution itself is almost unbearable because of how ordinary it feels. No speeches, no grand villain, no celebration, just routine, almost administrative. Kafka refuses to give us cinematic evil, because real systems rarely feel dramatic from the inside. They feel normal. Then comes one of the most devastating lines ever written. As Joseph K. dies, his final feeling is shame. Not anger, not innocence, shame. And Kafka leaves us with the unforgettable image that he dies like a dog. Think about that. Why shame? He never even learned what he supposedly did. Yet somehow, he dies feeling responsible. That is the court's true victory. Not killing him, teaching him to participate in his own condemnation. Now stop thinking about Joseph K. Think about yourself. How many invisible accusations do you carry? I'm not successful enough. I'm behind everyone else. I'm not attractive enough. I'm a disappointment. I'm wasting my life. Who wrote those charges? Can you name the judge? Or have those voices become so familiar that you assume they're simply reality? Kafka never tells us the crime. And that's brilliant. Because if he named it, the novel would become smaller. Instead, every reader inserts their own. Their regret, their insecurity, their fear, their secret. The blank space becomes a mirror. This is why the trial feels even more relevant today than it did in 1925. Because today, the court is everywhere, not as one institution, as thousands of invisible ones. Every social media feed asks for a verdict. Every algorithm ranks you. Every notification reminds you that someone else is richer, healthier, more attractive, more productive. Every platform quietly whispers you're being measured. Not by judges, by numbers, followers, likes, views, engagement, reach. We've built machines that constantly tell us where we stand, without ever telling us when we've done enough. Sound familiar? That's Kafka. And maybe the cruelest part isn't the technology. Maybe it's us. Because we volunteered. We refresh the feed. We compare ourselves. We hand over evidence every day. The court no longer needs officers. We report to it willingly. Here's the uncomfortable idea Kafka leaves us with. Maybe oppression survives because human beings desperately want someone else to define their worth. It's easier if someone else decides you're valuable. You don't have to. If someone else gives your life meaning, you never have to build it yourself. Freedom sounds beautiful until you realize it also means responsibility. The famous philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once argued that human beings are condemned to be free. Kafka shows the opposite fear, that human beings sometimes run away from freedom. Because uncertainty is terrifying. We'd rather have painful certainty than limitless possibility. This is why the trial isn't really about law. It isn't about government. It isn't even about justice. It's about the oldest human question of all. Who gets to decide who I am? Society, family, religion, success, failure. The internet. Your past or you. There's another reason the novel still hurts. Joseph K. spends the entire story searching for one final explanation. One sentence that will make everything make sense. He never gets it. Neither do we. Because life rarely explains itself. There is no narrator waiting at the end of adulthood to reveal why everything happened. No judge appears to hand us the script. Meaning isn't discovered. It's created. Kafka understood that. He simply refused to comfort us with easy answers. And maybe that's why people continue reading The Trial 100 years later. Not because it's mysterious. Not because it's confusing. But because every generation builds new courts. Different uniforms. Different technologies. Different rules. The same fear. The fear that somewhere, someone is measuring us. So perhaps the real tragedy wasn't that Joseph K. never learned his crime. Perhaps the real tragedy was that he eventually stopped asking whether there had ever been one at all. And maybe that's Kafka's final warning. The most dangerous lies are not the ones other people tell us. They are the accusations we repeat so often that they begin to sound like our own voice. So before you leave this story, ask yourself one question. If the court inside your head suddenly disappeared tomorrow, who would you become? Even if you've never heard of Franz Kafka, you've probably used one of his words. Kafkiska. It's become part of our language. We use it when someone is trapped inside a system, where the rules make no sense, where nobody can explain what's happening, and where simply trying to defend yourself somehow makes everything worse. That's how deeply this story entered our culture. That grounds the analysis. The system wins the moment you believe it understands you better than you understand yourself. Bureaucracy isn't dangerous because it's complicated. It's dangerous because nobody feels responsible anymore. Innocent people don't panic because they're guilty. They panic because they know truth isn't always enough. A prison becomes invisible the day people start decorating the walls. The hardest chains to break are the ones wrapped around your identity. The court never needed Joseph K. to confess. It only needed him to doubt himself. Think about how strange this is. We spent almost 40 minutes talking about a man whose crime we never discovered. Yet somehow, most people finish this story feeling guilty themselves. That's Kafka's genius. He never accused the reader. He simply created enough silence for our own fears to start speaking. Maybe that's why Kafka never told us the crime. Because once he did, we'd stop looking at ourselves. We'd point at Joseph K. We'd say, that could never happen to me. But without a crime, there's nowhere to hide. We become the accused. We become the witness. We become the judge. And maybe that's why the trial still refuses to end. Because every morning, somewhere in the world, someone wakes up, opens their phone, walks into an office, enters a courtroom, or simply looks into a mirror, already convinced they have something to prove. Kafka's question was never, what is Joseph K.'s crime? His real question was, who convinced you that your existence needed a defense? Maybe before we spend another day trying to prove our innocence. We should ask a different question. Who built the court inside our minds?